All right, so it is April 25th. This is the Kubernetes Cloud Provider Working Group meeting. So last week, I think we had a pretty long discussion about what the requirements are to push things to beta. So I actually changed the agenda up a little bit so that we actually leave that for the end. So we kind of address some of the smaller PRs. Let me just post the agenda in case anyone doesn't have it. Okay. First thing that I want to talk about was the AWS issue that we've been seeing last week with the multiple internal IPs on the kubelet. Micah, do you want to give us a quick update on that?
Yeah, sure. So I just put this in the issue, and I'll drop the issue in so everyone can see it in the chat. It's also in the, I think in the meeting notes. But so the kind of the overview is that with AWS specifically, like you can have multiple IPs that are private IPs. So the Kubernetes, multiple components in the control plane assume that you're just going to have one IP address per type for a node. So internal IP, external IP, internal DNS, external DNS, etc., and host name. So the problem is that with our CNI provider, we're attaching a secondary IP or secondary ENI with numerous secondary IPs, and that change was added in like 1.8 to support if someone wants to use a secondary ENI for the node's IP. But in our case, with our CNI provider, we're not using any of those IPs directly attached to the node. They're being handed off to pods. And so the node addresses method on the cloud provider implemented by AWS now returns all those IPs, and they're all getting posted up to the API server, and it's just picking up the last one off the list, which is not what we want. It ends up being a pod IP, and so that breaks master to node communication for logs, exec, that kind of stuff. So we basically want the correct IP to be reported, but between like the sort of the node addresses being the way to tell the kubelet, hey, here's addresses you can pick from. There's not really enough information to say this is the correct one to pick off the list. So yeah, I kind of put a couple options out there as to options I see to resolve this. And yeah, is that kind of enough of an explanation? Do you have more questions?
Yeah, and Nick, please chime in if you have anything. But it seems like from the issue that I read, it seems like there are two separate problems. Like one of them is that the node addresses, there's a bug in AWS where the node addresses is returning like multiple internal IPs. So we should fix that as a separate problem to only return the real local IPv4 address for the node. So if you can open a PR for that, that'd be great. Or let us know, and we can kind of find time to do that. And then the second issue is that the kubelet setting the node IP override, it's overriding all the different node address types, and it should only be overriding just the one. So I feel like once we address those two things, then we should be in a good place to fix that.
So you'd still like me to so we can add back, even when specifying node IP, the external DNS, external or internal DNS information as well?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can run with that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Steve from the EKS team too. Should we have two different separate issues for those two things? Because I know there's only one issue, and that's addressing the concern that Micah had.
Yeah, I think for the node IP override, we should probably open a separate issue for that because it does involve the kubelet team.
Okay. I also chatted briefly with SIG Networking, and I will say, I'm sure you're going to do it anyway, but please make sure that you include SIG Networking on all of this.
Yep, sounds good. Okay. So yeah, Michael, if you have any more questions, like in terms of implementation details, just ask us questions in the channel. We can try to get to that. Okay, so the next one was, right, so enabling Node IPAM controller on the KCM. So Walter, I already opened the PR for that. So whenever you have time, please take a look. Essentially, in 110, we disabled Node IPAM unless you specify an external cloud. And that caused issue. Well, on my end for DigitalOcean, it causes issue because if I specify an external cloud, we essentially disable Node IPAM, and so it breaks a lot of networking plugins like Flannel. So we want to re-enable it in the KCM, and then for clouds that do want some sort of Node IPAM controller, they can run it as part of the initialize step. So yeah, Walter, please take a look when you have time.
I don't know if you saw the comment I made. I'm all for it. We need a way to be able to disable it on the KCM. I agree it should be a separate disabling than the external. But for those of us who need it on the CCM, we need to be able to disable it on the KCM.
Yeah, if you look at the PR, it would be disabled if you don't set the allocate node cider flag on the KCM.
Okay. I'll try and look at that today.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Okay, so I think we can talk about the requirements for beta now. So so last week we talked about whether or not we want end-to-end tests as a blocker for pushing this feature to beta. And I think Jago and Caleb were kind of talking about it last week, but we kind of ran out of time. So Jago, did you end up chatting with Caleb and kind of hashing things out a bit more?
We have not talked anymore about that. I think there are distinct issues that we're conflating a bit. One is what is it for the CCM to go to beta, the external cloud provider functionality to go to beta. The other is this idea of required criteria for being included in the Kubernetes organization as a repository. And I do think it's reasonable. We've talked about articulating those, writing them down. We haven't done it yet, but I can imagine a strong case for saying if you want to be included in that and get the benefits of the tooling and be included in the Kubernetes organization, there has to be some demonstration that it's being actively maintained, and posting test results back to TestGrid and being a participant there seems like a reasonable way to demonstrate that commitment. But that in itself, again, just to reiterate my point last week, I don't think we should block on every current in-tree cloud provider to participate in that for the feature itself to go beta. So again, I'm sure there are more opinions on this. My suggestion is we make a draft doc and iterate on the doc. And I think SIG architecture likely has some input there. Even the steering committee may also have opinions on that. So I don't think it's something we can decide in a vacuum, but I'm just sharing my current perspective and opinion. Others?
Jago, I thought to get this CCM to beta, we can decide on our own, but getting the repositories in, like you said, there's a distinction there. Can we take CCM to beta on our own, and can we do that now?
I believe we should create a GitHub issue and designate and articulate that intent.
Okay.
And have that conversation in the appropriate channel. But I am supportive of doing that, and I don't think block on every current in-tree cloud provider participating in this emerging TestGrid dashboard. To me, the discussion about whether there is a Kubernetes org-owned repos for some sense of supported cloud provider, I don't know. I think that's a sticky wicket to get through, and I don't think it's reasonable to block on that. Other thoughts on that?
Okay.
So I have one quick question. Do we have a concrete, when we say beta, a lot of that's usually talking about what sort of backward compatibility we store, how long we have to maintain, signatures, that kind of thing. Do we have a concrete idea, since what we're talking about is a binary, what exactly we're guaranteeing won't change when we say the CCM is now beta?
It's the cloud provider interface.
Okay, that's fine. But that's like, okay, so that's, I'm also wondering if there's anything else, like, anything about the controllers, anything about the flags. I'm not trying to say we change what we're doing, but I do think we should be very concrete about what guarantees we're making when we say it's beta.
And in general, are people happy with the interface? Like, are there changes that people want to see?
Not on my end. It's been pretty. I haven't had the need to change it or tweak it in any sense yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we have either, but.
I've had a couple of discussions about people wanting to add to it, but I haven't heard anyone complaining about any of the signatures that are on it currently.
Is there anything people wanted to add that couldn't be addressed by using the initialize method to run their own controllers or whatever?
The CSI team came and chatted with me about, and I don't think we're actually going to change the cloud provider, but they were considering wanting to come in and add a method that would say what was the maximum number of volumes that could be attached to a node. And the thought was that might be cloud provider specific. I think we're actually going to solve it in a different way, but that's the sort of thing I've heard so far.
Okay. And for what it's worth, like, beta doesn't mean we can't add new methods, right? It just means be careful about deleting and changing.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think the only thing for me is we were last week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about deprecating external ID, and I think we've already done that, and it's kind of that's kind of settled. So I personally think we're in a good place to go to beta for the CCM, the cloud provider interface. And then, we'll readdress all the test grid and requirements for clouds as we push for GA. Unless anyone objects, then just speak up now.
Would it make sense to just take the cloud provider interface beta and do it as a two-step thing instead of calling the CCM beta? We first get the cloud provider interface to beta stage. I don't know if that provides any real benefits though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I do see the use for that, but they're also pretty closely tied together. And because in the CCM, in terms of like flags we use for the CCM, we actually reuse a lot of the component config from the KCM. So I feel like even if we wanted to deprecate some things on the CCM, it'll be closely tied to other things like the KCM.
That having been said, even if we want to do both, I think there is value to being explicit that the cloud provider interface is beta. So if we want to do both, fine. But I think there is value in beta-ing the cloud provider interface, just because if someone wants to make a change there, if they don't check CCM, they might not realize it's beta.
Right. So, okay. So this, I don't know if this is kind of far-fetched, but do we want to put the cloud provider interface on a typed package that's versioned? Like, would that make it clear for people to know, like, we have versions of the cloud provider, or do we just want to keep it where it is and just make sure that we're good about making breaking changes?
I'm not sure what that means to make it version, because can you explain that a little bit more?
Like, if you go to Kubernetes /API, like, we have version types, but those are like native Kubernetes resources. But like, I don't know, do we want some sort of, v1/provider package so that we're clear about
I have a suggestion on this. I think innately the answer is yes, but I'm not sure that's the way we want to do it.
Right.
My thought is that since what we're going to be dealing with is external cloud providers who are going to link presumably against a version of Kate's,
Right.
that maybe just the version of Kate's is sufficient.
Okay.
So we say, look, it's a 110 or a 111 cloud provider interface, and presumably they'll be linking against that anyway.
Yeah, that works for me.
Has anyone ever suggested taking the interface out of Kate's into its own subproject, just so that when you're working on something that you want to use the interface for, but you don't want to link against the entire Kate's?
I think there's I keep promising this doc, and it's up to about 7 pages and growing. I am really pushing to get this a version of my how to do a build out. I'm going to suggest it if you hadn't, Nick. That having been said, when I say I'm going to suggest it, I think right now I'm going to suggest that we do it through the staging route, as much as that pains me.
Yeah, similar to what we do for Client Go and.
Exactly. So yeah, I would agree with that, Nick, but I think we should do it through the staging route.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Okay, so I think the deadline for pushing features from alpha to beta is today. So I think as a working group, we should probably, I don't know how we want to do this, but it seems like we're all okay pushing for beta on the CCM and the cloud provider interface. So when this meeting ends, am I good to say to pull the trigger on that?
Can you create an issue and so that we can at least just share it around today, and then say by the end of today, if we don't get any significant objections on the issue, then we'll do it.
Sure. I think we have an issue on the features PR repo, so I'll post that on the channel, and then end of today, if no one has any objections, I'll let them know.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so aside from that, is there anything else anyone want to?
So next week is KubeCon Europe. I don't know if people are going to be there. They haven't published the schedule for the contributor conference yet, but I submitted a work session for cloud provider working group. So if that's accepted, then we'll have some amount of time during that during the unconference to work on any of these issues in person. So if people are going to be there and we have that session, keep your eyes open for it on, I guess it would be Tuesday.
Sweet. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, keep us posted in the channel.
Yeah, they haven't published the schedule for it yet. They had a Condorcet vote for it, but those results aren't back.
Cool. Thanks. Okay. So if there's nothing else, I wanted to talk about kind of next steps forward for what we want this working group to be in the upcoming months. So we've noticed that for anyone who's kind of joining us for the first time, we've noticed that the scope of this working group has kind of expanded more than what we wanted. So originally we wanted the working group to be working on kind of refactoring a lot of the Kubernetes code so that it's reusable from external providers. But then we're now dealing with problems like, end-to-end tests and all these things that kind of go beyond the scope of just a single working group. So I did kind of come up with the draft. There were some comments on it that I didn't get to address yet. But yeah, if anyone has had any time to think about it or has feedback or wants to talk about it now, we have about 10 minutes. So now would be a good time. If not, we can just kind of let it steep for another week and then talk about it next week.
Are we realistic? I mean, I like the steep idea, but are we realistically going to have this meeting next week since KubeCon is going on?
Right. Forgot about KubeCon. The week after that. Or I'm sure we can talk about it at KubeCon, whoever's there too. So.
Yeah, I did see this doc. I haven't looked more than I did the last time I saw it. But I know I did talk to Brian Grant a little bit about it in the hallway, and I think the crux of the situation is like, what code is this SIG going to own, and how does it overlap with the existing SIGs that are related to clouds? I think there are reasonable answers to both of those questions, but those are the questions that SIG architecture is going to ask as we go through this process. And so I do cringe back a little bit from SIG Cloud, because I think that ends up begging the question, what about providers that implement the interface that are not necessarily public clouds? And maybe SIG Cloud Provider or SIG Provider, or I definitely want to stay away from SIG Distro, but it's almost in that direction.
Yeah.
So I think focusing on the responsibilities and the interaction with other existing SIGs is the way to frame the conversation. And I think there are concerns that need a venue to talk about. And the best example is like the state machine versus collections of properties for, I forget the states that we came up with, like for nodes that go away, they're suspended and something else. That kind of conversation doesn't have a great venue today. And if we can abstract and expand that idea into this is the intention of this group, I think that will be a lot more clear than the straight up evolution of this group into a SIG, because we end up having to touch other things. So those are my initial thoughts and feedback from a quick hallway conversation with Brian that I know will come up in any proposal.
Yeah. Also, on the procedure process interaction perspective, I think we need to be very clear how we interact with SIG AWS, SIG Azure, SIG GCP, et al.
Okay, noted. Okay, I wrote that down on my notes, so I'll try to have more concrete examples and then kind of talk more about how we're going to integrate the other SIGs going forward. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, just so you know, I'm with SIG VMware, which recently started, and I'm going to try to attend these meetings. So maybe you don't have to actively reach out, because I'm coming in here trying to listen in on what's going on.
Excellent. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Definitely thank you for coming, but I think we need to be very clear on the boundaries and of responsibility and make sure we're not, in this case, stepping on the toes of SIG VMware,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right now I'd let you know, but I'm pretty flexible, and at this stage I'm just going to listen. And
yeah, I mean, I think that one of the goals was to give, guidance or requirements to all of the provider SIGs to, expected behavior. Like I think some of this came out, as to what happens if you want to delete do you delete nodes versus, restarting, different node behavior. And so, I think that's, that's the interfaces and how the providers behave with those interfaces, I think is fairly important.
Like all of Kubernetes, I think this stuff is potentially really in flux at all times too. It's still early in this project. So yeah. I'm also kind of paying attention to SIG Node and what they've got going on there with virtual kubelet. And it's going to be real challenging to assume some generic behavior in Kubernetes, the way it's expanding and going off into, 3 or more directions at the same time. If we can just aspire to maybe having this group host work that is reusable across all the cloud providers, or even most of them, that would be really useful. I mean, where else do you put it? You don't really want chunks of code being re-implemented 5 times over or 10 times over if you've got 5 or 10 cloud providers. So this might be a good place to have those sorts of discussions to, surface commonalities or it doesn't even have to be reusable by 100% of the people. If it's reusable by most, that would have some value.
Yeah, and finding and fixing bugs across all of those implementations and subtle drift in behavior as reasonable people incrementally evolve their version. It's not a new problem, but it's one that maybe we can cut off a little bit.
Well, you know what you could do, for speaking, wearing my hat as a chair of a cloud provider SIG, I'm going there trying to gather all the documentation on what the cloud provider interface is and proposals for where it's going. And just hosting that at a central doc level would be a really useful function, and maybe even, conducting cross-provider training sessions and things because without that, I'm afraid they are going to drift, left on their own devices. So this tool could be really useful if it's willing to assume a role like that.
That's valuable feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, so I think we have 2 minutes left. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up? 2 minutes. Okay, Chris, I did want to sync up with you later about what the end-to-end test looks like on OpenStack. So I don't think we have time now, but yeah, let's sync up later. And if no one else has anything, I think we can end the meeting now.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way, on getting posting back to TestGrid. Mitra sent me the dashboard of the OpenStack test getting posted. It's great. Good work. Okay, thanks everybody. Take care.
All right.
See ya.